So thank you everyone for your patience in letting this webinar start. Before we start off, I would like to share a proud moment that Unix Infotech is now the ISACA licensed premium CMMI partner. So this is based on the various activities and the business generations. So we are proud to be associated with ISACA. So let's dive down into our topic. My name is Himanshu Karkhanis, as introduced by my friend Riddhi. So thanks, Riddhi. The topic of today, as you all know, is understanding the difference between CMMI for development version 1.3 and CMMI for development version 2.0. Well, talking about differences, the first difference is right here in front of you. Okay. If you look carefully, what we have written is CMMI for development version 1.3, but we have written CMMI development version 2.0. So where's the for gone? Well, it's not missing. That is the way it is supposed to be written in version 2.0. Okay, so there are also some nomenclature differences. And of course, we are going to look at the technical differences in the coming slides. But this is the first difference for you. Okay. Let's look at some timelines first so that we better understand the flow of how this journey started and finally how we reach at version 2.0. So CMMI, as we know it now, was never called as CMMI earlier. It was called as CMM. Okay, because it was simply the capability maturity model. And because it started for development. And that was between 1987 to 1997. So about 10 years, this was retained as CMM. The first instance of CMMI, as we know it, the I, that is the integration part, it came out in 2002. You can see that CMM was quite a robust and successful model. And even today, the basics of everything that we see, whether it is 2.0 or any version, comes from CMM for sure. So the first version, CMMI 1.1, got released in 2002, followed by version 1.2 in 2006, and then 1.3 in 2010. So it roughly each of these versions, okay, it stayed for about 4 years. That's a good thing. And now if you see between version 1.3 and 2.0, we have about 8 years of gap. So that definitely tells you about the success of version 1.3. And sure enough, because that was the most popular model, the adoption was great in terms of worldwide, and number of companies that adopted version 1.3 far greater. And now comes CMMI version 2.0. And what you can notice as a difference is definitely that it's not just 1.4. Okay, why is the new version not called 1.4? Why is it 2.0? Because it's a paradigm change. There's a total change, and that is why we are having this webinar. My attempt will be to explain to you some key differences between the two versions, the previous one and this one. So it's like a whole baseline new benchmark version. And this came into picture on March 28, 2018, but that's specific to development. Later on, of course, now we have services and other things added to this whole model because it's now to be called as a suite. It's more like a bundle of a lot of modules. Okay, let's move ahead. As I said, CMMI 2.0 is more like a product suite composed of many components. Okay, let's have a quick look at each component. The most obvious component is the model, because just like you had a model earlier, you still have a model PDF. By the way, as you can see at the end, the bottom of this page, it's no longer free. Okay, so version 1.3, even today you can download for free. 2.0 is a paid model. And that's where I told you at the start that there's a value add to the business that is being provided by CMMI for this model. Okay, then because this model is related with the appraisal method, so we have an appraisal method as well, which is being released. It's a new method. The appraisal is now called as benchmark appraisal, and I'll tell you more about it later. Then there is a module that talks about training and certification. So there's a whole lot of new requirements for training and also certifications. So in case you are previously trained, let's say, appraisal team members or ATMs for version 1.3, then please have a look at the website. There are some very specific experience requirements in order to upgrade yourself to version 2.0. And then there are some new tools and systems that are being introduced. Okay. And in fact, the model is now also available as an online viewer. It's called the Model Viewer. So it's like an online application where you get the flexibility of looking at the model, because when it's a PDF, you have to use Control F. You want to go to a particular section, but the model gives you a lot of flexibility. So you can also check it out. But of course, when you have to buy the model. And finally, there's also an adoption guidance, because CMMI does understand that most organizations will be transitioning from, let's say, 1.3 to 2.0. So there's a transition guidance for that. Also, there's a guidance for new adopters, those who are new to the model, those who are going to use something like CMMI for the first time. So that's for that. You also have the adoption guidance available. That's about the product suite of CMMI. Let's look at some nomenclature differences. Okay, that's where I was coming about. The first and foremost is what we used to call process areas are now called practice areas. Okay, that's a very fundamental difference. And even now, I also call it, sometimes as process areas, because we are used to calling it. Version 1.3 was there for, as I said, for 8 years. So, that's why we have this habit of calling it as process areas. But because now the focus is on value addition and implementation, and CMMI felt that the word process areas led to a misinterpretation that there are some set of procedures to be implemented. No, there's some set of practices to be performed. Okay, because CMMI does not tell you how to do certain thing, it only tells you what to do. The how part is left to you. So now the process areas are now called as practice areas. Okay, so that's one key difference that we all should be knowing about. Now, another difference was specific and generic practices. Those of you who have implemented CMMI previously must be knowing that we used to call them SPs and GPs. So now that part is gone. All you have is practices. There's no specific, no generic, just plain practices. Then the appraisal method was popularly called as SCAMPI, which used to stand for Standard CMMI Appraisal Method for Process Improvement. And again, just to make sure that they have a value add, they have now given the name as benchmark. So benchmark appraisal is similar to your SCAMPI A appraisal, where you get the ratings, the maturity level ratings, right? So it's now called as a benchmark appraisal. And finally, they don't want you to simply look at it as only as a guidance model, but along with the guidance model, it's more like a product suite. It offers you something more than the guidance model. So the guidance model is still there. Okay, it still remains a guidance model, but it's something more than it gives you many other things as well. Okay. Finally, we used to call the different lookouts or views like development, CMMI for services, CMMI for acquisition. We used to call them constellations. Now that is called as model views. So they have now tried to make it more, I would say, graphical, okay, more visual, so that people are able to pick and choose like a fruit basket or a fruit and vegetable basket. So you can pick and choose the nice ones as per your requirements. So this is something about the nomenclatures. Let's look at now the structural differences between the previous model and the new model, because there's a very big structural change. Now in CMMI version 1.3, okay, everything started with a maturity level. So you would first have a maturity level in mind. Organizations would have a target or a desire or a business goal for some maturity level. And if you look at the model of version 1.3, under each under a specific maturity level, you had specific number of process areas. So under each maturity level, you had process areas. Okay. Then under each process area, you would have two types of goals, generic goals and specific goals. And to achieve those goals, you would have practices. So that's why you would have generic practices under generic goals and specific practices under specific goals. Now it's a total transformation. It's like inverse. Now first is what you call as views. So views would be what is your desire. Okay. What is it that you want in your organization? Do you want to improve only the engineering practices? You want to improve only the planning related practices? You want to improve whole of your development and practices? So this is something like a view that you could select. And under each view, you have practice areas. So where is the maturity level gone? Is there no maturity level? No, there is maturity level. But now the maturity levels are within a practice area. So by the way, now process areas became practice areas, as we have learned some time back. So each practice area has got practices covering up to certain levels. Some practice areas have got practices up to level 2 only, like configuration management. Some practice areas have got practices up to level 5. Some have got practices up to level 4 and 3. Okay, so now it's not about if I am targeting a particular maturity level, so I have to look at only those number of process areas or practice areas. Now it's like if you're targeting level 3, well, you got everything. So all the flavors are now introduced, and of course we'll talk more about that. So yeah, and then under each level you have practices, right? So as you can see, this is the structure. Okay, so this is your view that you want to select, and then you get the required number of practice areas. And under each practice area, you have one or more practices under each level. So you have level 1 group, you have level 2 group, you have level 3 group. So you have this group of practices. So what used to be goals, in version 1.3 is now similar to something called as practice group. So there are other concepts also like intent and value, which we are going to talk about, but more or less it is about the group. The goals that used to be there are no longer there. And under each level, you have practices. So under level 1 group, you would have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. Okay. And well, I got some interesting comments. Isn't it more complex? Yes, every new model is complex, but then if you know it, try to make it more simple. All right. So let's understand it. Let's move ahead. Now, if you want, this was just a quick compare. So this was the earlier one, and this is the flip that I was talking about. So levels inside process areas rather than process areas inside a level. Okay, so that's your comparative stuff. Now, this is the model viewer that I was talking about. Though we are not authorized to, open the link itself in front of you, but I can share some snapshot. And this is how the model viewer looks like. Okay, whenever you buy a license or you get access to it. So you can start with, there are many filters. So you can start with a view that you want, like development, and then you select the maturity level. And then there is also a context. Context will be, let's say you are a software development firm and you are aiming for CMMI development. But you also want to improve, and you also want to know if you have some services that you offer to customers, how can you implement CMMI for development in the context of services? So now that's the flexibility that CMMI is offering you. Earlier, it was very rigid. You either had development or services. Now it's like you can have a mix of both, right? Even service-oriented organizations will have some development, some manufacturing going on. What if they want to target CMMI for services, but with the context of development? Now you can do that, right? So remember this. So you get this view, and then you get the list of practice areas over here, and then when you click, you get all the information here. Okay. So this is about the model viewer. Talking more about context, let's look at what are the different contexts available. Let's say if you're going for CMMI development, right? So one context could be supplier management. If you are outsourcing some activities in your software development life cycle, then you could definitely go for select this context. Now, what happens when you select a context? So let me go back to the model viewer. What happens if I select some context? Let's say if I select supplier management. Well, your practice areas are not going to change, but this content, this output, it will throw you some guidance related information, some guidance on implementation in the context that you have selected. So if you have selected supplier management for development, and then it will show you the guidance on how to do that. Okay. But if you are buying the model anyways, you get a PDF version, and the PDF contains all the contents. So you don't have to choose while buying because you might change your mind later. So it gives you all the context already there in the PDF. PDF is like a complete encyclopedia of version 2.0. Okay. But these are the various contexts available. You also have a context of services for development. You have agile methodologies. Then you would have a question on, well, I feel that I've heard from some community that, you know what, CMMI is good for waterfall. That's one wrong notion that many people have because the practices might be difficult to understand from agile context. So here you have an option of choosing the agile context, in which case you will get the whole information for every practice area, how to implement it from the agile perspective. Okay, that's how valuable it is now. And of course, development with development. And there are some new areas added by CMMI, which there are new practice areas, and they are optional. As of today, they are optional. They might make it, club it with some of the views, but so far it's optional. So you have a choice of not to look at them. So there are practice areas that talk about safety in terms of, there are practice areas that talk about safety in terms of safety of your processes and whatever it is that you're doing in the organization, safety of your data. It also talks about security. So maybe security of your data, security of your tools, technologies. It also talks, and there's also, okay, I don't want any context. There's also a virtual delivery context. Everything is happening virtually today. All the services, most of the services are being offered virtually, right? So there is also a practice area for that called as enabling virtual solution delivery, or EVST. Even when we do appraisals, we are supposed to follow that practice area and only do appraisals from that. So you have so many contexts, okay? And you can just pick and choose the context that suits you, or you can just select all and you get the flavors of everything, okay? Let's also talk about some domain views, because I told you that there are views available, okay? But then depending on the view, you would have an option of, not an option, but there's a limit. For example, in certain views, you can only target up to level 3. And in certain views, you can target up to level 5. So let's have a look at that. So development with development will up to maturity level 5. ML means maturity level. Development with a view of only engineering and development. So now you want to focus only on the engineering processes in your organization. So coding, designing, okay, product integration, and only those kind of processes. Then you can select the view as engineering and development. But then you get to target only up to level 3. Simply because there are no high maturity practices for engineering areas. Because engineering is just engineering. Okay. If you select development with the view of services, then you can also go for up to level 5. If you select supplier management, then 2, you can go up to level 5, and then there are many more. There are many more views. So once you can buy the model, you can definitely come to know. So let's talk about the scope. For example, if you're targeting a particular maturity level, what to expect in 2.0, right? Let's try to address that question. So this image, okay, this image is for your version 1.3. So let's say that you wanted to target for level 2 in version 1.3, you would have these 7 practice areas. If you wanted to target level 3, you would have the 7 plus 11, 18 practice areas. If you were to target level 4, you would have 7 plus 11 plus 2, so that's 20 practice areas. And finally, if you wanted to target the highest optimum level, level 5, you would have to take care of 22 practice areas, right? There is similar thing in version 2.0, but with a big difference. But let's look at that difference, okay? So first of all, regardless of the level that you choose, you have an option of selecting these 4 new practice areas, which are optional. Enabling safety, enabling security, enabling virtual solution delivery. That's I'm delivering a training virtually. And managing security threats and vulnerabilities. So they're kind of related with each other. So these are the optional ones. Let's look at the core ones, the main practice areas. Again, CMMI for development, right? So let's say that you're assessing yourself for maturity level 1. Now, there is nothing like maturity level 1 as far as appraisals are concerned, but now CMMI recognizes that even maturity level 1 is a level. So it means reactive processes, but with something that you are doing. So it also has 14 practice areas. Out of that, the 4 are this one, the optional ones. So the main ones are 10. So even if it's level 1, it's 10 practice areas that you take care of. Okay. Now, what if you target the first applicable maturity level in appraisals, which is level 2? Well, you still have 40. Or I would say 10 if you don't select any one of these, because as I said, they are optional. So even at level 2, now you have to take care of 10 practice areas for CMMI development version 2.0. That's a difference for you. At level 3, well, the whole suite is applicable. The whole list of practice areas is applicable. There are 20 practice areas for CMMI development version 2.0 total. And it's not like version 1.3, where you could have limited number of practice areas for limited level. If you're targeting level 3, you must take care of all the 20 core practice areas plus the 4 optional ones. I mean, if you choose that option, right? So that's another big difference for those of you who are thinking to adopt. But it's an advantage, right? And we'll talk about that advantage. But still, what do you think? Right? You can always let me know if so far you find version 2.0 as better than 1.3, or you feel that 1.3 was better. Do let us know. Do let me know your comments. And it will be really interesting because we have just got into the matter. So till now, we had spoken about the differences about the scope, the nomenclature, right? And how the structure has been created for 2.0. Let's go a bit more deeper. Now, let's look at the nervous system. Nervous system means what is the basis of this 2.0? What really runs behind this new model? Because a lot of research has gone into 1.3, as you all know. So 2.0 goals are gone. Okay, you don't have the specific or generic goals, but we can say that the new concepts of intent and value, they can be the closest to these goals. Because remember, goal was something that you wanted to achieve, and the value, right? So that's exactly what is intent and value, right? So intent will be about, well, why are you doing this? Why are you doing something? So let's say you know the process area called as DAR, decision analysis and resolution. Why are you doing this? What is your intent behind it? And what is the value that you expect to get, right? So what can you accomplish out of doing? Now, each practice area in 2.0 has got one intent statement. Every practice area. Okay. Value, again, let me bring back to why 2.0 was introduced. So it talks is that about a business value, not just a process value. So value talks about a business value that you can achieve by performing the practice. And every practice area as well as every practice under the practice area. Oh my God, it's so confusing, right? Practice under a practice area. So every practice under a practice area contains a value statement because they want you to understand why should I do or implement a practice. Intent I came to know from the practice area, but what is the value if I do a particular practice? Okay. So now you have this information in 2.0. In fact, let's look at an example. One example is of a practice area called as monitoring and control. Any guess? What practice area is it from 1.3? What's the transformation? Anyone? Let's look at your chats. Anyone remembers? Oh, fantastic. So that's Mr. Naveen. Thank you very much. Right answer, PMC, Project Monitoring and Control. So that has now got transformed to monitoring and control, right? Let's look at the intent statement for MC. So the intent statement says, provides an understanding of the project progress. So appropriate corrective actions can be taken when performance deviates significantly from the plans. So your intent is to take appropriate corrective actions, and that also take them on time. What is the value out of doing that? Let's read that also. So the value is, it increases the probability of meeting objectives. Please focus on the word objectives. It increases the probability of meeting the objectives by taking early actions to adjust for significant performance deviation. That means you have business objectives, right? Every organization will have business objective. To take care of that, it will have process objectives, and then you will have some practices. So you should do a practice because it will help you to achieve the process objectives, which in turn will help you to achieve your business objective. Now, when I say achieve, I'm not saying that you do it today and tomorrow you get a business objective, but you at least work towards, you align towards meeting the business objective. So now the model is not only for people who are in one corner of the office doing the coding. This is for everybody to think on the broader context. Whatever it is that you're doing, you're a tester, you're a designer, you're a project manager, you think from the business perspective. That's how they have introduced the intent and the value. Okay. I hope things are clear. Please do keep posting your questions. So the essence, let's look at the essence now. So we looked at the nervous system. Now let's look at how the practice areas are distributed. Okay. So the first essence in how the practice areas are distributed is by categories. Okay, so it's driven by categories. Now, in order to address the business problems, okay, I need to have some definite direction because that can decide my action. So from direction comes action, and from action comes some improvement. So I know the right direction. Now, there are 4 types of capabilities that can be, considered whenever I want to address any business problem. And those 4 categories are doing, managing, enabling, and improving. So 4 categories. Looks like PDCA, maybe, right? Plan, do, check, act, something similar to that. So each of these, okay, each of these categories requires some capability. For example, I need capability to perform activities related to doing. So I just want to do something, create, manufacture, test. I need some capabilities. I also need capabilities to manage. I need capabilities for being an enabler, to make something happen, to create something. I also need capabilities to improve something, to think about improvement. So each of these categories contains some capability areas in the version 2.0 model. So 4 categories, and you have 12 capability areas. So these are the 12 capability areas. I'm just going to let this slide be there for 10 seconds. So each capability area will have some practices. So when I said we have 20 practice areas, so each of these 20 practice areas will belong to one or more of these capability areas. And each capability area will belong to one or more of this. So one of these categories, not one or more, one of these categories. So categories, capability areas, and practice areas. So when you think from your organization perspective, you can actually boil down to the area, specific area that you want to improve. Right? That's why they have introduced this concept. Moving further, let's look at, because this webinar is about differences again, let's look at some practice area level differences. Okay. Well, project planning is only planning now. So one word less. Project monitoring and control is now monitoring and control. Again, one word less. Measurement and analysis is now upgraded. So it has got some more muscles, steroids, and it's now become managing performance and measurement. So that's, I think it's the most longest and most, I would say, I'm not say complex, but a very elaborate and elite practice area. Do read about it when you, if possible. Organizational process definition. Remember, a process area at level 3 is now a practice area called as process asset development. So see, they have made it very clear. Process asset development, that's what it is, PAD. And then you had organizational process focus, which spoke about improvements to your existing process. And this would be about standardizing your processes. So process focus is now just simply process management, but they can't write it PM because PM also means project management. So they have called it PCM. Okay. And process and product quality assurance is now process quality assurance, because there was some misunderstanding that why product quality, because we already have testing. But people did not probably understand that here the product means a work product. A document is also a work product. So, but now just for clarity, it is called as process quality assurance. So PQA, right? And interestingly, planning already, planning had estimation as one of the area, right? On the project planning, you had estimation. So now that estimation has been removed, and again, it has got promoted. So there are some promotions now in the model. Clap, clap, clap. So planning estimation is now a separate practice area. This shows that how much importance has been now given to estimation. So those of you who are adopting this, please make sure you have a rationale for estimation. You use some estimation techniques which are well documented, and everybody follows it as a process wherever required. So that's one heads up for all of you. The peer reviews from verification is now a separate practice area. So again, a focus on subject matter expert review. So there is a split sometimes, but everywhere there is not a split. Sometimes there is a marriage as a combination and integration also. For example, verification and validation were separate areas, right? Were and were. So now they have come together because now the peer review part has gone out. So now they can be integrated together. So that's integration compatibility. So that's a single practice area now. Requirements development and requirements management were not just different practice areas, but process areas, but they were at different levels. Now they're again combined into requirements development and management. Risk management has got an interesting change. Okay. Remember, the whole world used to do SWOT analysis, right? Strength, weakness, opportunities, threats, even before CMMI. Now, so the community was asking why, if we are doing risk management, why don't we talk about opportunity management? Why don't we analyze opportunities in the same way as risk? Because risk is something which is not real, right? Something that may happen. So opportunity is something, a benefit that we may get. So now risk management is now risk and opportunity management, but it's still written as RSK. There's no RSKO. Okay. So, but remember, it has an opportunity factor. PQA gets promoted to level 3. Now PQA, your PPQA was at level 2, remember? So now what does it mean to you? It means that quality assurance activities also have to be standardized. And that's really a good thing. Plan gets promoted to, wow, level 4. So it's a big jump because plan process area, practice area, it gets now a high maturity flavor. All right. So it's very interesting. Sam got promoted to level 4, right? Sam, imagine it was just for uh, like supplier agreement management. So that gets promoted to level 4. Oh, yes, a good comment is same as the ISO 2015. Risk and opportunity was always part of the same thing. So yes, good comment there. And then we have another significant transformation. I would call this the biggest difference. Okay. You remember generic practices, right? Now, generic practices are removed. So what we have is 2 new practice areas which actually do something more than the generic practices. And those are, we have implementation infrastructure and governance, II and GOV. And they actually do more than replacing the generic practices because, well, you have a process improvement, but how do you ensure that it's habitual and persistent? Habitual means in the blood. It should be there in the blood. Okay, no matter whether you're sleeping or driving or walking, you just do it. That's a cultural change. And how long can you continue doing that? It's not about one-time development just for the sake of an appraisal. It's like a real development that happens over and over again. That's where you introduce. They have introduced II and GOV. Okay, so implementation infrastructure, it focuses on having all the necessary things, like you have competencies, you have money, you need infrastructure, approvals, funding, people, everything, right? So you want to do configuration management. Should you use a new tool? Can you just use your shared server, or should you use SharePoint? Should you use GitLab, VSS, or whatever, SVN? What should you use and why do you want it? So depending on your need, there should be something to take care of. That's where your II comes into picture. But then all this is redundant unless there is a clear and strong direction from the senior management. And that's where governance comes into picture. Remember, version 1.3 did not explicitly talk about senior management. It talked about higher management. Higher is not necessarily senior. But here, it focuses squarely. That's why I should have made the word bold and highlighted in Zoom. It explicitly, requires the involvement of senior management because they are the decision makers. Why? Because 2.0 is intended to give you business value. So your senior management should be involved to check if whatever you are doing has any business value or not, how much it is connected with the business objectives. Okay. In fact, every practice of governance starts with the 2 words. Senior management should do this. Senior management is expected. Senior management must do this. Every practice starts with the word senior management. So that's one thing, that information that you can communicate to your senior management, or if the senior management is there in this webinar, welcome to this world of CMMI. I'm sure you will enjoy the journey. Your involvement is really necessary, right? So that's one good change that has been done. And yeah, and the reason is again habituality and persistence. Okay. There are some debuts happening. So some new things are happening to the areas that were already there. So for example, remember DAR, decision analysis and resolution. Now DAR has got this new practice that develop, keep updated and use a description of role-based decision authority. It means that you don't just stick at DAR, you don't just add that DAR, but after you do the DAR analysis, there should be some subject matter expert authority to guide you on a decision. Should you do another level of DAR? Should you do a statistical DAR for that matter? Or should you just use those legacy methods, redundant method? So that's one new addition. In managing performance and measurement, which was your measurement and analysis, now it makes you do or makes you have a data quality policy. It's not that you measure something you put it in a graph, then you say there's a deviation, and then you do some action. No. Is your data accurate? Just because you have 100 data points does not mean your data is accurate. What is the quality of your data? Does it really signify the current situation, your current process performance? So now you need to have a data quality process, and in indirectly saying you need to have a policy. Okay, that's one brilliant addition. And process asset development, which was OPD, well, it has something similar to make, buy, reuse analysis. So you have to also see if you want to create all the new templates and processes, or you can reuse from something else, maybe ISO. But ISO is a standard. CMMI is a guidance model. So maybe you can reuse something from ISO. Maybe you can reuse something from Quality 4.0. There's a lot of new models coming up. Or you can buy something and then you can, just to fasten your journey. And then you first buy because you don't have the technical expertise. You want to buy and then you want to learn about it. So that's another introduction that has been done. In PQA, you have, because PQA is about reviewing other things. Okay. So it tells you, don't just stop at auditing other processes. What is the change that PQA itself should do? What changes should be done in PQA, right? So that's what it talks about also. And that's something, and that's why it's at level 3. That's why I told you that PQA is promoted to level 3 now. So it records opportunities for its own improvement, not for the others improvements, right? And as I said, there are flavors. So those of you who may be sad that, okay, now we have more number of practice areas, but you should smile, you should be happy because, see, guess what? Now you can do something on causal analysis, which was not expected up to level 3 in version 1.3. Though you had root cause analysis, which was finding the root cause. But now you're talking about causal analysis, which means finding all the possible causes, maybe proactively. And nothing is stopping you from using statistics just because you're at level 2 or 3. There's no rule that you have to use statistics only from level 4. Expectation starts, but it's not a rule. So plan gets the high maturity flavor. Risk management gets opportunity management. So these are all the flavors that we have seen. So it's really a good change. Talking about the appraisals, let's come to the appraisal perspective. So as I said, this appraisal is now called as a benchmark appraisal. Validity remains 3 years. The earlier SCAMP-A also had validity of 3 years. So, but it's just called as benchmark. And if you remember, there was 2 types of SCAMP-E, SCAMP-B and C, which were more like a mini appraisal. And SCAMP-C was like a gap analysis. Now those appraisals are called as evaluation appraisals. Okay, there's no validity as such, but they're only about the findings. And there's a new type of appraisal that has been introduced, which is sustainment appraisal. What it means is that, let's say you go for a benchmark appraisal, you get level 3. Now at the end of the 3rd year, you don't want to go for a new appraisal. You want to know whether you are continuing or sustaining. Remember sustaining? You're sustaining the same level. So you go for a sustainment appraisal, which only checks whether you are still able to retain the same maturity level or not. So you get an extension. If the results are positive, you get 2 years. So now your validity becomes 5 years total. At the end of the 3rd year, you get 2 years of extension because the validity is 2 years. And then you can continue with the same maturity level. Okay, but you can do that maximum twice. Otherwise, obviously, companies will just go on doing that. And after the second sustainment appraisal, you have to finally go for the benchmark appraisal as well. Right. So this was about appraisal perspective. And the last but very important point, one big change in version 2.0. Yes, it is applicable for level 5. Everything is applicable for level 5. Naveen. So coming to this, there is a report called as performance report that is now expected as part of the appraisal delivery. And as I told you, version 2.0 focuses on business improvement. So business objectives and meeting them. So an organization actually writes the whole story of its journey, actual journey is being recorded, right from business objectives here, yeah, to the type of work, to what are the process objectives here, and what are the type of actions that you do, what are some of the root causes that you, because of which the process was not improving, and again, what activities were done to sustain and make the processes and process improvement persistent, right? So that was, this is some report that is being expected now from every organization which is going for an appraisal. And with this, it wants to establish and confirm and affirm that, well, this model is purely designed for some business value, and you can actually check if implementing CMMI has helped you in achieving any business objectives or not. Right. So this is for the performance report. So that was it from my side. We'll go to, before we go to the question and answer sessions, I would first like to thank all of you, okay, for attending this session in the difficult times and difficult schedules. I only hope that this introduction to the differences was, important to you. Remember, there are no very much core fundamentals. It remains a guidance model, but there are some important things that it was necessary to be shared. I want to thank ISACA team because of their permission to let us use some resources. I would like to thank my digital marketing team for enabling the webinars and designing them. Thank you, Riddhi and team. And finally, the delivery team at QNX, which supported with a lot of data and the sequence and the information. So thank you a lot for everybody for hearing. We have got some nice comments and questions. And if you have any new questions, please start posting them. I'll address them as and when they came. So very, very new to the model. Yes. Okay. So that's good. You have come at the right time. And I think all those of you who are new to the model, they don't know about version 1.3. Please leave your email addresses. We'll guide you on how you can buy the model. In fact, there are some shareable stuff that for which you don't need to pay anything. And we'll be happy to share those with you. And yes, so somebody has asked a quite nice question of what if we have ISO infrastructure already in place? Well, if you are having ISO infrastructure in place, there are many elements that would map with the expectations of CMMI. Because remember, everything is about process improvement. So it's not north and south. They are not. So ISO and CMMI only complement each other if you really know how to integrate them, right? So yes, you can definitely use them. And more complex, yeah, I think it's not about the complexity, but it has added more flavors. Yeah. Does version 2.0 support the software as a service, product development, and managed service? Yes, it does. That's where you have the context for services. Select that and you will find a lot of guidance information on software as a service. So, but more specific, it would be CMMI development, not CMMI services. Okay. And more questions. So let's pause for a few seconds if anybody has any more questions. Meanwhile, these are my contact details. If ever after this webinar you have some questions in mind, do feel free to reach out to me. I'll keep this on for some time. A very good question coming up. Will GOV and II be assessed at project level or at organizational level? A very good question. Simply put, remember, II and GOV are unique practice areas because they have to be assessed with respect to all the other processes in the organization. So as an organization, you will have a lot of process groups, right? Project management related processes, technical processes, coordination processes, support processes. So these are your process groups. So for each group, you have to look at the II and GOV practices in the context of these groups. So you are doing you are doing DAR. So for DAR, do you have the necessary funding? Do you have the clear direction from senior management? That's how you should look at II and GO, right? So it's at both project and organizational level. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Thank you for your appreciation, Mr. Bhaskar. And thanks, Ashwini, for this question. Okay, meanwhile, so as far as Unix is concerned, these are our expertise areas where you can take our services. And there's one question says how to implement different practice areas, also available in PDF from CMMI PDF. So I think your question is about how to implement the practice areas in the existing CMMI PDF, that is 1.3. Would that be your question? Then, well, you know the differences. Every process area that you see in version 1.3, the main elements remain the same. So it's not that you stop doing whatever you did during 1.3. It's not that you now need to have a very different QMS. That's not the whole point. Remember, the transformation is from inside. It's not an external transformation. So the whole structure remains the same. Okay. So don't hurry into, like scurrying into changing the whole QMS and writing it as 2.0. You don't have to do that. Okay. So meanwhile, if you want to reach us for any of the services or for anything, you can reach out to our sales team. This is the email address. And you also have the phone number on the screen. By the way, if you want to look at the previous webinar videos and including this video, if you were not able to follow it from the start, please visit our YouTube page and you can search for Unix Infotech and you'll get the videos. I'm sure this video will be uploaded in maybe a couple of days as well, and you can do that. So thanks to everybody for this wonderful session. So Riddhi, do you think we should close this? Or what do you suggest? Any more announcements to make?
No, we're fine with it. Thank you for the participants.
Thank you all the participants. I really hope you could get some ammunition to start implementing, and that should drive you to go for CMMI version 2.0. Thank you very much. Please stay safe, and I look forward to meeting all of you in the next webinar series. So thank you very much.